Okay, perfect, excellent. Well, welcome to the DTools webinar. This webinar is really designed for the higher ed industry. Today what we're going to be doing is talking about how we can help solve some project challenges that you may be facing. Before we go ahead and dive in, what I'll do is just give you a little brief introduction about our company. Now, the whole reason we're here today is to talk about project challenges. So what are some of the issues or problems that you're facing? So always like to just get a little bit of feedback from those that are here in the meeting. So what I'm going to do is let's go ahead and just launch a quick poll here. Just curious to see, here we go. So you should see that pop up on your screen. I'm just curious to see what some of the challenges everyone else is facing right now. Unfortunately, I can only put 5 on there. I wish I had a spot for 10 or 15, but just wanted to push that out there to see what current problems you're facing that you'd like to see solved. So while we're waiting on that, what we'll do is we'll talk about some of the challenges that we see a lot of schools facing. One is, you may have a kind of what I would call like a homegrown estimation tool. Oftentimes this is an Excel or some other basic program. With that, part of that is keeping up with product information and pricing. So we'll show you today how we can help solve that for you. We have a huge product library. We also track industry standard labor times. We'll show you how that works. And then, a lot of times as the projects start to get bigger and more frequent within the campus or the school, you'll find that the need or demand for doing drawings is really important. So a lot of times people don't have a really good solid drawing solution, or the drawing tool is obviously separate from where you're managing your product pricing and equipment details. So we'll show you how we can help you out with that today. And of course, if you're like most schools, resources are at a minimum. So your team's likely smaller than it really needs to be. So that means you wear a lot of hats and you have to do a lot of things day to day. And so with juggling all of that responsibility, like I said, things can slip through the cracks, and it's also not scalable. So what we're going to do today is we'll show you how we can help solve some of these common problems. The good news, it looks like, across the board, most of you, are sharing the same problems. It looks like, we're having issues with creating project estimates and getting budgets together, not only the speed of those, but also the accuracy, and then also managing the as-built systems, and also really just managing the project install. Whether you're doing that in-house or whether that's being subcontracted out. So appreciate that. That's great. And then what we're going to do, let's go ahead and move on to the next slide here. Now, before we dive into a little bit more about us, just want to let you know that we have worked with over 100 colleges and universities over the years. These are just a small sampling of the 100+ schools that we work with. So, after the webinar, if there's anybody you'd like to speak to that has used the software for years, we're always happy to make the introduction to show you how we've helped solve some of those problems for these schools and then some. So a little bit about us as a company. If you're not familiar with DTools, we are a software solution. We've been around for about 20 years now. We're purpose-built about 20 years ago for integrators. What we found is, over the last 5 to 8 years, more and more schools, colleges, and universities, the projects are getting bigger. They're starting to bring a lot of that management and design in-house. So really, there's a need for a true project management solution, from estimation to design all the way to install. So that's where we've kind of started working about 8 or 9 years ago with some schools, and it's grown quite a bit. It's actually quite popular now. We'll probably have close to 200 schools and universities using the system here within the next 6 to 12 months. Like I said, primarily working with integrators though. We have a little over 6,000 integrators that use our system. Of course, there's a lot of similarities of what you're doing day to day that an integrator does, but obviously there's some specific, nuances as well too that we're familiar with and can help you out with. So one of the things that we can help solve is project estimation. And I know that was one of the things that was mentioned here in the poll is a challenge is getting an estimate together, the speed of doing that and making sure it's accurate. So one of the things that we've done, we've got this huge product library, and it's not just AV. I mean, the AV is one of the spaces that we work in, but it also includes security products, IT or networking products, really anything low voltage. So we've got this massive millions of parts library. We're always adding and updating items in there, usually 2,000 to 10,000 parts a week. And not only is the product details in there, like, of course, descriptions, images, maybe list price, but we're also tracking industry standard labor time. So when you're putting together these projects, a big part of that is labor. How much time is it going to take? How much is that going to cost? Especially if you're going to put this out for bids, kind of good to have an idea budget-wise how much time we expect this thing to take before we put it out to integrators. So whether you're doing it in-house or whether it's being pushed out and subcontracted from another company, it's good to know that information so we can help you out in that arena as well. And we do have, customizable reports. So if you are submitting proposals, like most schools, internally to different department heads or different folks that are requesting these projects and needing to get approval, we can put together some nice looking proposals that don't take much time. We can make them very user friendly, include images and some pretty detailed descriptions. And we also have an online portal too. So all your documentation, whether it's drawing, proposals, of course, later down the road, change orders or revisions, all that can be reviewed and signed off online as well. Now, engineering is another part of this. I know that some of you in the meeting today mentioned that was one of your challenges as well, as creating drawings and managing drawings. So we do work with the two industry standard drawing tools, AutoCAD and Visio, and we make the drawing tools, much better than they are right out of the box. We make it drag and drop, so you can simply drag and drop from either the equipment list that you built, or the really nice thing with the system is you can actually draw things out on a floor plan. You can build a rack, you can do a wiring diagram, and as you build a drawing, it actually creates your equipment list and helps you put together that budget at the same time. So you'll get not only your equipment pricing, but you'll get your labor estimates and all the other things adding up as you go. And that's a really big deal when changes start to happen on your projects. That's oftentimes another challenge people have is, whenever change orders or revisions happen, things can easily slip through the cracks. Things can, may forget to update it in one place, but you updated it over here. So, with our system, when you change it in one place, it changes everywhere. So the equipment list or the estimate gets updated, the drawings all get updated, even down to wire checklist and wire labels. If you're doing the install in-house, we can manage and help build all that stuff for you too as a part of the process. And this is really, having drawings, if you're not doing drawings now or not to the level that you want, this can really help avoid issues, especially if you are subcontracting out to integrators or other trades. So it makes it very clear what you're looking for, so there's no mistakes or miscommunications there. And then, of course, if you're doing it in-house, makes it even easier for your install team to get in there and get it done quickly. Now, the third part of this is project management. That's another area that in the poll today, everyone mentioned is a challenge or problem that you're facing. So we can certainly help you out with that. So with this, with the project management, if you're doing it in-house, you probably, once again, have a small team that's responsible for a lot of classrooms and a lot of projects. So we have tools in here to make it easy when you're out and about doing installs. You can, through our mobile tool, check off and track, okay, I've installed this. I can put in a serial number. I can put in an IP address from my phone or tablet. And that's going to update your as-builts inside the system. You can take photos. You can make site changes. So it just gives you a real simple interface for tracking the installs on campus. Now, if you're not doing the installations in-house, or maybe, sometimes on the bigger projects, you may subcontract that out to an integrator, you can still give them temporary access to this mobile tool. So you can still keep a finger on the pulse of what's happening out in the field. They can go through, you can see what they've completed, they can enter the serial numbers, take photos for you, and help you make sure your as-builts and your asset management is accurate for that project. So we do all the tools in here in place for helping you with that. If you also are doing service, we do have a service module inside the system where you can manage all your service requests if needed. And all this data too, by the way, we can freely export out in various formats. We do have an API, so a lot of you probably have a system on campus that you're using for doing all of your ordering and things, so we can help push that data out to minimize the double entry for your projects. Now, there's a lot of stuff that we're going to review today as we get into the software and talk about some of the challenges and how we can help solve them. We've these are just some of the many features that we do that are designed for what you're doing every day. So if you've used a program that's, one size fits all or generic, you found that, you're always having to come up with workarounds, or it doesn't quite work the way that you need it to work. So today I'll be happy to show you how we can help solve some of those challenges we mentioned earlier and run through it. So let's go ahead and show you what DTools, and like I said, we'll kind of talk about some of these challenges as we're going through it as I'm showing you the software. So we'll talk about some of the issues, and we'll talk about how the system may be able to help you out with solving that. So let's go ahead and move over here to the software. Now, as I mentioned, for anyone that's joined in to the webinar in the last few minutes, feel free to post questions as we run through it. And I'll certainly be answering those here later in the webinar. So first things first, so let's go ahead and jump into it. Now, I mentioned a little bit earlier that we have a library. So let me just show you what that looks like. Let's go up here to the library. So when you're starting off with using a solution like this, the first major step is getting your equipment or brands that you use into your personal database. Now, as I mentioned, we've got this massive library, millions and millions of parts, thousands being updated weekly. So you just go here to the manufacturer you want. Let's use Crestron. Of course, we have the other common ones. Most campuses are either using Crestron, Extron, or AMX. So we have all those brands represented here in the library. Now, several hundred of these manufacturers are actually helping manage this database, so that helps even more on our side. So you go through, you can download anything you want here from our library. You can download everything or just the individual parts. Now, if you do need something that we don't have, you can always request it. Our data team is very responsive and always happy to add stuff for you at your request, and then we'll put it in there so you can download it. You can still create your own parts too, keep that in mind. Now, let me show you what we track in our database and talk a little bit about how this kind of helps solve some of the problems that you're probably facing here day to day. So let's pull this up here. I'm going to open up just a pretty basic part here in AMP. So this item here in the database, let me make this a little bit larger. You'll notice that we're tracking the basic stuff you'd expect. Manufacturer, model numbers there. We do categorize everything for you, include the pictures. Now, the pictures can be used for some simple one-line drawings. This can also be used when you're presenting that proposal. A lot of times if the person's not very, tech savvy, they may, okay, why is this thing $7,000? You can, include a picture to help explain what it is. We do also allow you to organize your parts into systems. So, whether you're doing, AV projects with this or security projects or networking projects, we can break down, what systems you're estimating the most, where the money's going, where the labor is going. We can give you some pretty nice dashboards, which sometimes a lot of the admins or directors want to see that. We can put out some nice pretty graphs and details on where the money's going over that budget year. We have descriptions in here. We do a short and long description. Once again, gives you control to show whichever details you want. You've got the price tab. This is where your pricing is going to be stored. Now, this is kind of where it does change up a bit, depending on your role, or depending on the user for this. Now, for schools, your cost is usually the sell price. I have worked with a few schools that do build a little bit of margin to help pay for their department, but for the most part, the cost and sell price will probably be the same for you. Probably don't have a need for managing multiple price tiers, so it'll be a little more simplified than what you see here on my screen. So we do have different ways of bringing in pricing. You can import price sheets in. You can also use what's called a price rule. So if you get preferential pricing for being an educational institution, you can say, okay, my cost is 50% off a list on this brand. So a couple different ways of easily setting this up and managing it. We also have the ability to store labor, as I mentioned earlier. So this is an industry standard install time. Feel free to use it. You can always change it if you want to. And on a per project basis, you can also put your own rates in. So if you're not doing the install, you can put in what the market rate is from the integrator, and that'll give you a good labor cost estimate for the project. And we even put phases on there too. So if this is a larger project, sometimes bigger projects may be going on over the course of a year or two or more. It kind of allows you to break down what each phase of the project is going to be, time-wise, price-wise, cost-wise, everything there. So it's all in. Now, one little note on pricing, if you're not really sourcing the products, if you're a school that's putting this out for bid most of the time, you may not have, cost in here at all. You may just have the list price as a reference point. We can always push out the projects that you build and have them fill in the pricing, and you can bring it back in. So we'll show you how that works. We can store the vendors, who this is ordered from, if needed. POs can be generated or they can be pushed out. Now, from a technical standpoint, part of what we do to integrate the engineering process and save you time there is we do track dimensions. We also track power and heat and weight. So the reason we care about this is if you want to go in and build a rack layout, you can drag and drop, make sure everything's going to fit properly on the drawing page. And this is good, of course, if you're doing a new build or if you're just wanting to go back and document existing systems, you can do that. So it makes it a lot easier when, if you know a unit is, dead or dying or needs to be replaced, it's much easier to be able to do that from the comfort of your desk, pull up the rack, drag the old equipment out, drag the new one in, make sure it's going to fit properly, decide what you need so you don't have to go make a trip to that specific spot. We also do track the power and heat ratings. This gives you rack load reports so you can see how much power, weight, heat we're getting off of that unit or location, so we can add all that stuff up for you. So if you're doing that off to the side, just another quick way to save time. Now the IOs, we do track this if you want to get down to the wiring diagram detail. It's a very good idea to have all of your systems documented from an IO level so we know how everything's connected up. This makes that process much, much faster. Could easily save you 70 or 80% of your time on doing that since we do have that data there. And what's nice is it also builds cable checklists. So if we're doing an install in a new project or upgrading a system, it'll break down all of our wire connections and what it's going from and to. The beauty of it is it also will create unique wire numbers. So all your wire labels will be created. And we do interface with most of the common industry labeling machines, so you can just upload it and print them off. So once again, think about how much time that takes. Whether you're doing it or whether your integrator is doing it, it's going to save some time there. We do track accessories. Now, accessories are going to be other things that you may need for the install. So one of the things that, we see a lot of times with schools is, okay, we estimated this project, but then of course comes this little small or sometimes large list of things that we forgot to account for on the project. So this allows you to build in those things that you commonly need, things like power supplies, rack kits, programming. All that can be attached to the item, so as you drag and drop it into a project, you can be reminded, hey, don't forget this, don't forget that. And another nice little feature too is alternates. Now, this is a scenario if you're kind of bouncing between ideas with whoever the project's being built for. This allows you to show them some options, some alternatives. So we could say, okay, for this classroom or this auditorium, here's our options for doing an LCD screen versus doing a projection screen versus an LED wall. You can show different price options for doing different scenarios without having to build 3 different proposals. So makes it a little easier to do that. And then you also have find and projects. This gets into the asset management part of it. So I can go in here and quickly find everywhere I have this item on campus. I can see that it's actually 54 on campus. It's in 36 locations. This was our average cost, average price, average labor, everything's there. So it allows you to go back and quickly find things that may need to be upgraded year over year. If there's a recall, I can quickly put my finger on where all they're at. So comes in real handy for the asset management side of things. So all your cut sheets, user guides, all that stuff is linked up. You can pull that stuff down as needed. So it's just a little bit on the data part of this. I want to show you what's happening in the background. Now, a huge benefit that's a big time saver for those of you doing projects on campus is we have the ability to create packages. So you can create systems that you find yourself using frequently. No need to recreate the wheel. You can build out one classroom, save it as a configuration, and then later on you can easily duplicate it or distribute it across multiple locations. So that could be a whole classroom. It could be a smaller subsystem, maybe like a screen projector, and all the cabling and mounts. It can also be something very simple like a plate. It doesn't have to be a very big item, but even in a plate, you got usually a lot of little small parts and pieces that make it up. So the good thing about this, I don't have to overwhelm the end user with all this information. They could care less how many back boxes or connectors we have in there. They'll just say, okay, we've got 16 plates going into this project. You still get the detail of what you need to order and what you need to manage on the install side, but it does simplify things quite a bit on the proposal part. So that's a little bit on the background of this. I just wanted to give you an introduction to this, because if I don't, usually what happens when we get into a project and you start seeing all these things being automated and happening in the background, you kind of wonder, where did that come from? So just giving you a little bit of peek at the back end here of the system. So let's go build something with this, and let's show you how we can help solve some of these problems here as we go through building a project. So first thing we're going to do is we're going to start a new project up here at the top. Now, some of this stuff you may not need. So once again, going back to the fact that this is used by thousands of integrators, there's some things that they care about that you don't necessarily need to worry about. So we'll kind of just, skip over the things that we don't need. First thing is the client. Now, when we say client, from a education standpoint, that's usually either the department or department head or the end user that's requesting the project. So I'm just going to come in here. I'm going to select just a general client. We can put in a project name, so we can call this let's call it the new science building for right now. And you can keep track of what stage we're at. So we can say right now we're in the discovery or estimating stage. These are all stages that you can customize, so whatever is helpful for you to kind of keep track of where things are at in your pipeline. You can set start and end dates as well, which is used for tracking and reporting. You've got your contacts. Now, other than the end user or the department, the person that you're speaking with, you may have other trades you need to interact with, maybe an architect, a GC, electrician. You can add their details in here, so that way you and everyone touching the project knows who those people are. Next, we have the address details, so we can plug those in. We have tax rates. So usually for school, this is tax exempt. So this would just be tax exempt by default. So you don't even really need to worry about that. You can just skip over it. Got project resources. Now, if you do have more than a couple people on your team, you may want to assign who's doing what on the project. And this can also be used as a permissions thing. So if you do need to kind of block anybody from accessing it, you can always do that. Scope of work. Now, so for a lot of schools, you have to put together a scope of work or statement of work for the project. Once again, this can be a little bit tedious to have to do and be time consuming. So what we do is we do allow you to build upon this, where you can actually drop in what are called snippets. So I could say, okay, I've got an auditorium, classroom type A, surveillance. I'll throw a couple other options in here. So when we do this, this will drop in our different system descriptions or scope of work templates. Gives us a nice little head start, and we can always modify it or adjust it as needed. But like I said, not having to recreate the wheel over and over again. So you can save these templates here to the program. Locations. Now, this is probably, of this whole setup, this is probably one of the biggest things that's important for higher ed, is identifying all the areas where this equipment's going to go. So what we're going to do is, now you can go in, you can go in and punch in all these different locations. You can create a bunch of different tiers for it. I'm going to just for time's sake, I'm going to go in and just grab one that's already been set up. Now you'll notice this has multiple hierarchies to it. Let's go ahead and import it in. So in this example, I have a campus name, I've got a building name, I've got a floor name, I've got a room name, and I also have, I've gotten down to the rack or closet level. So you don't have to go that deep, but it does come quite handy, especially not just during install, but also service later on. So that's all there. Next is a thing called payment terms. Really, this is not necessarily, this isn't used by most schools, so we can skip that step. That's just for if you're an integrator getting payments. But there is a nice little area called custom fields. So if you want to track, building code, Wi-Fi password, you may already have this information if you're doing the work in-house, but if this does get, a portion of this or all of this does get pushed out to an integrator or subcontractor, you may want to share this information temporarily via a mobile tool that we have, so you can store that there. So let's go ahead and save that. Now that's going to set up our project here, and we can start putting some items into it. Now, with DTools, I mentioned earlier, we have really two routes we can go with this. We can actually start by creating an equipment list first. So if you like to, to start by drag and dropping stuff into rooms and building up your list, that's a good place to start here. And then later we can drag and drop those items onto a drawing page. So we do make it really easy to transition to the drawing side. Now, the other option is, which is really a unique thing to our system, is the fact that we can do a drawing first. So I can actually start by dragging and dropping items onto a floor plan. I can start building a rack. I can start doing a real simple one-line drawing. And as I build my drawing, it's going to create my equipment list. It's going to add up all my equipment costs, my labor estimates and costs. So I'm essentially going to get my budget or proposal generated based off my drawing. So if you're a visual person, that actually becomes a very fast, efficient, accurate way of building the system, and you get two jobs done at one time. So to kind of give you, since the real life scenario is, you're probably going to do it. You may do it one of both ways. Just depends on the size or scope of the project. So I'm going to show you a little bit of both. We'll add a few parts here to the equipment list. We'll go to the drawing. I'll maybe add a few more parts there, and we'll show you how all that stuff gets tied together. Now, the locations that we've set up, you'll see those are listed here on the right. You can always edit those or add to those later. You've got your databases here on the left. You got your product explorer. That's going to be your individual items. You've also got a labor explorer where you can just throw in flat labor charges into the project. And you can also put in your packages. Those are your pre-built systems that we saw. So let's go find a couple items here. I'm just going to go grab that amp we looked at earlier. Now, once you find the product, you can just simply drag and drop it right into a location. We'll say rack 1. This now reminds me of other things I may want to consider. So I can put in some programming. I can adjust the number of hours on it. I can also drop in the vent panel. So very efficient, quick way of doing that. So it gets dropped in. Now, the search works really well. So if you don't have every part number in your head, the good news is you don't have to. You can just say, you know what, I want a speaker. And you can type in a brand name. You can type in a price range. Very user-friendly interface. We search on all the fields that you want to. We select our part. And then we can also drag and drop this into multiple locations at once. So a lot of times with projects on campus, you're probably, duplicating this across multiple rooms. So I can go in here and do this. And one thing I forgot to mention earlier, when you're setting up your rooms, we do have a kind of a automatic room numbering system. So you can say, hey, I need classroom 1101 to 1190, and it'll just, create all those rooms there for you. So drag and drop it out. So it's going to go into these 4 locations. With this, now we're also getting another reminder here. It's going to be a ceiling bracket and also a preferred cable. So cable is a great thing to include. So speakers, keypads, access control, cameras, whatever it is you're putting in, we can link all that up with it. Now, when you're dealing with bulk wire, we're going to ask you, okay, what do you estimate that wire length to be? Now, this comes in handy for a few things. This will help create, keep a rolling list of how much cable we need to order later on. It's also going to give you a more accurate pricing estimate based on that. So let's go ahead and I'm going to assign a head into this and also put in a wire length. Okay. All right. So now we just distribute that across multiple locations here. And so that's now built up. We can easily see a breakdown by room. So, once again, if you get questions about, okay, what if we take this room out of the project, or what if we, double up on this in this room, you can play with the numbers and see everything organized here by location or by system if you want. Now, once you start getting all your equipment in, naturally at some point you're going to need to get a report out of it to present a proposal or quote. So you go up here to the top, and just to kind of generate a quick report on that, let's go up here and let's go do a proposal with images. And I'm going to break it down here by location. Now, we do have a lot of options that you can adjust on this, whether or not you want to show the labor breakdown here in the project. You can also choose whether or not things like model numbers or line item prices are being displayed. So that's something you can just choose in your preferences there. So let me turn that back on. I want to show the model numbers and line item pricing, and we can show what that looks like. Now you can completely customize this. It can be branded to your school if you care to do that. We also can assist you with that as well. So real quick, simple document, shows my cover sheets. You can put an image on the front too for that building or location, and then just shows me what's going into the project. So real simple, easy to follow. Got some pictures there. I'm showing my accessories if you want to do that. And then if you don't want to commit to model numbers, you can also turn that off. And you get down here to the bottom, and this shows you the summary. Now, this is a very detailed labor breakdown. You don't have to do that. But if you want to know where, want to know where all the labor is coming from, we can easily break it down there based on that. So real quick, easy proposal, and you can add other elements to this, like the scope of work and other things that you may want to present. So that's kind of how you build this up from an equipment list standpoint. So this gets it out of a spreadsheet or some other tool, gets it in here so you can see and organize the data how you want. So now let's take this over to the drawing side. Let's show you how this actually can be used to build up a drawing here in the program. Now, as far as tools that are being used right now, there's several different programs out there that are used for drawings. Most common are either Visio or AutoCAD in the EDU space, which we do fully integrate with both of those. Let me show you how we do that. I'll just do Visio today, but we can also, if you want to see AutoCAD, I'll certainly circle back and show that here. Let's go in here and do this. Choose your paper size. Now, if you've never used Visio before, this is a pretty easy tool to work with. We do make it fully drag and drop, and as you see today, we're going to auto number and your cables, your parts. We'll bring out the correct icons for you. So we do take a lot of the time and the guesswork out of it. It's really as easy as it gets on the drawing side. And it's all tied to your equipment list, which is a big deal. So that way, anything you add along the way gets added to the equipment list. You never have an issue of mismatching parts list versus drawing. So it's always linked up. So one of the things we'll do to save time, let me go up here. I'm just going to turn this grid off, just make it a little easier to see. This will have your logo on there. It's going to have your school information. It's going to have the project details on there. And then you'll see down at the bottom, we've got 4 different types of drawings that we can do. Now, if you just want to start with a real simple drawing, we have what's called a line drawing. It just brings out the pictures of the items. So if you're at the stage of really just kind of getting the conceptual layout done and just kind of talking through it with the end user, this is a good drawing to work with. So I'm going to pull up this project editor here. Now, this is a separate window. This is by design. We pull up the parts list as a separate floating window, so you can do it on 2 screens or do a split screen like I'm doing here. And I can just simply grab, the imp, the speaker, and the cable, and just drag and drop it right onto the drawing page. Okay, so this will now bring out our items here. We can now connect this up however we want to. And then, as you can see, we start laying this thing out. Now you can display things like the room name on there if you want to. This shows me, it's in the science building, 1st floor conference room. Over on the left, you'll see a little Visio symbol showed up in my parts list. So that way I can visually see, what's on the page, what's not. The good thing is it won't let you add any of those items that are on this page again. So I can't have an issue of having 6 speakers on the drawing, but only 5 in the parts list. So once again, that can't happen here. So that's kind of how you take it from parts list over to the drawing. Now there's 3 other drawings that we can do. The other drawing type is an elevation. This is great for if you want to show a rack layout, if you want to show a podium or screen at the front of an auditorium. Now we didn't put a rack in here yet, so I'm going to go drop a rack into the drawing, but it's going to also add it to the equipment list at the same time. So let's go add rack 1, rack 2 here. That's where it's going to go. Let's go find our rack here. So let's go pull this out. I'm just going to do a quick search. You have all the common rack manufacturers in there, so you just choose your preference there and then drag and drop it out. Okay, so this will now add the racks to my drawing. You'll notice that the racks have now been added to the equipment list. And you'll note that the price has actually gone up now. So equipment and labor has now been accounted for with that. We go over here and grab our parts and we just drag and drop them into the rack. As I mentioned earlier, you can get rack load reports and all the other details here based on that, but we can now snap this where we want. Grab the wrong part there. Let's go grab the vent panel. Now, so I can build this up virtually, make sure it's going to fit properly before we submit our order. So we can lay this thing out. And once again, becomes very helpful too when it comes to doing service and upgrades later on, having this documented. Another one is a plan view. It's probably one of the more common drawings to do. This is where you bring in a floor plan. Let me go full screen with this. Now, floor plans, first off, if you get access to floor plans, that's one thing. You may not always have that, especially if you've got some older buildings on campus. But if you do, you can still bring in a fire plan, like insert an image if you want to. We can also insert CAD drawings, even if you don't have AutoCAD. We can also insert PDFs. And we have a nice PDF conversion tool that will scale the PDF and allow you to turn stuff on and off on it. So let me go ahead and just go grab a CAD file here real quick. And let's see, got that. Okay, let's go ahead and drop it in. So with this, we're now going to be able to drop icons on the floor plan, and we do track all the industry standard icons in here, so you will be getting industry standard shapes on the page. So let's go in here. I'm going to go do Office 1. We'll do the speaker and cable. I'm going to drop it in. So this now lays out our part here on the page. We can see the cable details. We can connect this up, of course, on the end. So every device gets a label. Every cable gets a label. We can easily track it and reference it. And we do have labels you can also put on your devices out in the field. So not just for the wires, but also for the equipment. So that's how you do your floor plans. A really kind of neat feature I like is you can actually start with a floor plan first. You can actually link up the floor plan rooms to rooms in your project. So you can freely just start dropping stuff into the rooms where you want them to go, create your equipment list, all broken out by location for you as you go. And then lastly is that schematic view. So this is where you can get into how the system is wired up. So we'll come over here and I'll just show you a quick example of that. Drag it over. So with this is going to bring out the input-output information for the part. Now, as it's doing this, it's also cross-referencing other connections you've made across the other drawing pages. So, and we do track your wire connections, so that way there's no wire conflicts throughout this. Let me make this full screen here so you can see a little better. So remember that I had taken this cable and connected it up on a previous drawing. So all I have to do here is I'm going to snap it up to an output. And I'm going to take this other end here and I'm going to snap this up to my speaker. Okay. So that's not only made the connection on the drawing, but it's actually put it on a checklist for us. So now we've got a nice little wire checklist or cable schedule we can follow for the install or hand off to the integrator. So they have all those details there. Also, another important thing, as I mentioned earlier, you can show different things like locations, serial numbers, IP addresses that can all be logged and made visible on your drawings. And another little trick too that we developed, you can hide the IOs you don't need. So you can just remove the things you don't need just to trim up the page here so you can put more stuff on it. So that's just a little example of how our integration works with the Visio side. We can do the same drag and drop integration with the AutoCAD side. So you can use your tool of preference or you can use both. And once again, all linked up to your reporting and proposals as you go. Now for the webinar, for time's sake, we do have the ability to do change orders. We have a really solid change order and revision process that locks things down, keeps every version in the background. So just know that we can handle that part of it really well for your needs. Let's go ahead and save this here. And then what we're going to do is we're going to go ahead and close this out. Now, the next stage of this is getting into the install progress and or process. Now, that was another thing, the poll that we did earlier in the webinar was managing the project install is another pain point for a lot of you. So let me show you how we can help with managing that part of it, whether you do it in-house or whether that's done by an integrator. So we come down here to the bottom. Now, you'll notice this really kind of becomes your functional dashboard of what's going on. So when I select a project, I can see all my files in one location. I can see all my revisions and change orders here. I can also see any task or service that's been done in that location. So let's go in here and let's schedule this out for an install. Let's go in here. And once again, depending on your scenario, you may be doing this in-house, you may be having an integrator do it. You can give an integrator temporary access to the mobile part of the system and of course deactivate it later on. So let's go in, so we're going to install the speakers. Here's our task. So I'm going to put a name on there. I'm going to go in, I'm going to choose my items here. So this will allow me to select all the items that we put in to this project here. Okay. Now, once you start to get a pretty large list of items here, this list isn't very big since we just did a small sample, but the filters come in very handy for this. I can go in and quickly say, okay, I want to go in and do the items in the AV closet. Or I could say, let's go in and do just the rough-in or pre-wire phase of the project. Or I can select type of equipment. So you can see there's a lot of different filters to quickly kind of break this down. That filter is also available for looking at numbers and other details on the project. Now that labor time that we track is not only used for estimating labor costs up front, but it also comes in handy when you're scheduling out resources or trying to figure out how much time this is going to take to complete. So we can see it's going to take 12 hours for this. I'm going to choose my resources. So in this example, I'm going to treat this as if we're doing this in-house. So I'm going to select Jeff and Joey. If you had a subcontractor, they would just be listed here, or you can go add a new one to your system. All right, so I'm going to do this. I'm going to split this in two. So this is going to do 6 hours each, so we can get it done here in one day. And I want to go over here and select this to be done on the 30th. And this will tell us what our end time should be based on that. Okay. All right, so we've gone and set this thing up, and now we're ready to go ahead and push this out. Now, this can be sent out via Outlook or Google Calendar if those are your tools you're using in-house and want to stick with it. We do have our own built-in calendaring tools that can be viewed in the software and on the mobile. And we can also just push this right out to our mobile install tool. Okay, so this gets queued up, and this will now get sent out the door. Now, I can attach copies of drawings, so if I want that to be viewable from out in the field, we can. And then we'll go ahead and hit publish here. All right, so this now gets sent out. It sends an email notification to whoever is assigned or associated to that project or that install. So pull this up here. This is the email I just received. So I can now go view the task and dive right into it. All right. Okay, let me pull this up here. So one of the things we'll need to do here, I need to log in. You can also save your login credentials too to save a little bit of time. So do that here. And then I'll need to put in my password. Change my account that I'm using here. Actually, I'm using my desktop today. Let's go ahead and log in. All right, so we've got a dashboard. So this gives you a very quick, easy snapshot of what you've got going on, install and service-wise. You can still use the install component of DTools without having to use the service part. So this is, once again, another challenge a lot of people are facing is trying to keep up with both of these. So we can do like kind of pull it together all in one spot. You do have access to a calendar, so you can see your personal schedule of what's going on from your mobile device. If you're an admin in the system, you can take a look at other people's schedules on the team or on the subcontractor side. And then what we'll do is we'll go to tasks. So this is where I can see all my open tasks. There's the one that we just set up today. So let's go ahead and click into it, and we'll show you how this gets managed. So once again, whether you're doing this yourself or you have an integrator doing it, they can log in and we can actually see, okay, where's the project for? We can use the timer here so we can actually start and stop our time as needed. The timer is optional. You can always just do a manual entry on time if you do want to keep tabs on the actual time spent. Items, this is where we can keep tabs on what's been completed. So we can actually use this as both a pick list if we want, and I can also go back and use this as an install list. So this actually does a date stamp for you. You can also enter other details like serial numbers, IP addresses, MAC addresses, notes. That'll once again update your as-built back in the software, so you're not having to try to write it down on paper, come back and enter it into a spreadsheet. We can pull all that stuff in through our cloud interface with that. And of course, if you've entered that in earlier in the software, this will be populated here. Now, site items, of course, we know the fact of life is when you're out on site, there's going to be things that you may end up having to put in that you didn't anticipate. There may be some additional labor that you have to do. And that could also just be from scope creep. If you're out on site putting stuff in, maybe the end user's like, hey, could you also throw one of these in, or can you also fix this, or all things that creep up at the last minute. So you can also document the product and labor that you had to use. And this will actually, once again, send it back, get added to the project so we can manage that as a change order. Also site notes, allows you to keep quick running total or log of all the things that are happening here on site. Once again, you can choose to be opted into email notifications on all of that. Site images, nice little feature is you can snap photos from your phone or tablet when you're out in the field. So let me go grab a photo here that we can toss in. So we'll say, camera in front hall. There we go. So, and that once again, stored with the project. So you've got it there, and that can be taken from anyone using the mobile tool. Now there's an approval. If you require a sign-off, this is where that can come in for the approval that the work was done to satisfaction. You can, of course, expand that to show what was completed and what site work was done. And this will get date and time stamped, and once again, is in the system, stored with it. And then at the end of the day, too, also there's that timesheet. Let me go ahead and hit stop on the timer. So if you did want to track actual time, if you do need to keep up with that, there's a time log here, which you can also add to manually as needed. So we can just drop in 3.5 hours, put it in there. So this is, like I said, real streamlined interface for the install side. Make your updates, track your progress. Everything gets updated back on the software side. So you can actually go into the project at any point here. Let's go ahead and open that up. And then what I'll be able to do is I can actually see this progress on your end here. So we can see what's happening out in the field. So let's go here to layout and install. So all those fields I showed you earlier, you'll notice that those are actually being tracked here in the software as well. So that's a little bit on that. Now, big picture schedule-wise, you may want to look at what's going on. You do have access to a calendar. We designed the calendar, which looks a lot like Outlook, which is what a lot of people are used to using. So we can come in here, activate whose schedules we want to take a look at. So you'll notice I'm looking at a kind of a timeline view, but you can also look at the standard views that you would see in something like Outlook, like your month view. You got your work week view, and you got your day view. So real easy to make adjustments here as you're working on this. If I need to move this around to a different day, you can just move it around here as needed, and that'll update. So all that information there gets pulled up and rolled up into what we call our dashboard. So earlier in the meeting, the webinar, I mentioned that you may have requirements coming from the admin team or director or department head, as far as what's happening in your department. So this allows you to take a look at, okay, what do we have in the pipeline, project-wise and budget-wise going on. So you can kind of break all this stuff out here by stage if you want to. We can take a look at, what products we're using the most, what labor types we're using the most, what systems we're installing the most. All this information and data is here, and this is all customizable. So I can kind of change this up. I can see we use wire and cable way more than everything else here. And you can, of course, change it into pretty graphs and charts and stuff if you want based on that. So that's all there. But yeah, so it's a little bit about what we do there. So, as we're getting close to the hour mark, we'll kind of wrap things up here and open it up to questions. But hopefully this was helpful to kind of show you how, a software solution like dTools may be able to help you out with some of the project challenges that you're facing day to day with your jobs. And like I said, if some of the features that you've seen today is more than you need, still talk to us, let us know. We can probably work a solution out for you based on your needs. But yeah, like I said, we've certainly helped well over 100 other colleges and universities, and hopefully we can help you out as well. So I'm going to go ahead and open it up for questions here for the last few minutes. Feel free to post those in the questions window, and I'll be happy to review those. Looks like we do have one from earlier that I did miss. So let me pull that out here so we can take a look at it. Okay. One of the questions was, how good is dTools at importing and incorporating drawings from SketchUp? Good question. It depends on the file format. We can pretty much import any file format that you want. I mean, SketchUp files, I don't think there may not be a direct import from the SketchUp file, but worst case scenario is you can always take a screenshot of it and then you can insert that image in and then do an overlay on top of that. But yeah, there are certainly ways of accomplishing it. Absolutely. So let's see here. Let's take a look at the other questions here. So one was on pricing. The software, it depends on the number of users, and also depends on your level of experience. If you're familiar with DTools, you may not need as much training. If you're not, probably need a little bit more one-on-one training. So depends on a couple different factors. So it's best to have that as a one-on-one conversation so we can figure out what your needs are, how you'd use it, and we can make some recommendations for you on what would be best software and implementation-wise. So, yep, good question, though. How is training handled is another question. We do have a lot of different training options. We do online training, so we can just do one-on-one training. We do webinars. So webinar like we're doing today, we actually host 2 of these per week on different topics. And one is building a proposal or budget, one's doing drawings, one's ordering. So there's all these different courses you can jump in and take for free throughout the week. And if you've got a larger team, sometimes we'll suggest doing an on-site training. We can come to you and spend a few days. We also will have regional trainings. We actually do one. We try to do one at least one of our schools that use the system. Like last year we did it at Notre Dame. So we'll have those come up as well for that. So yep. One of the questions is Active Directory integration available? It isn't yet. That's actually something that we're working on currently. So I'm hoping or anticipating that to be in one of the next couple of releases. We do at least, I would say, 3 to 4 releases a year. And so that is one of the requests we've been getting. And right now, all the user controls are managed within the software. There is very tight user controls you can set up as far as like password strength. You can also, do the 2-factor authentication. There's all these different things that you can do. So, there is some good user controls in the program with permission rights, but unfortunately not integrated with Active Directory at the moment. But we'll be doing that. Another question is DTools, is it a on-premise or cloud-based? The answer is it can be both. We do offer it in 2 different ways of deployment. You can do it on-premise. So if you prefer to manage it in-house, you can put it on a local server there on campus, and you just install the client software on all your machines, and that just directly communicates with your server. Works really well over VPN, so if you do need to access that server from outside your campus network, you can still do that. We'd also offer a cloud or hosted server option, which is becoming more and more popular. So with that, we would take care of the server up on the web for you. We manage all the backups for you, take care of all the updates on the machine, so it's pretty much hands-free. You would still need to install client software on all your laptops and desktops, which does give you the freedom to work offline still if you need to. And with the way our software works is concurrent user base, so you can put the software on as many machines as you want. You can have as many user accounts as you want. The number of licenses you need is really determined by how many people you think would be in it at the same time or concurrently. So as far as the server piece, it can go cloud or on-prem for that. So very good questions. Let's see here, taking a look here. I think we've got all those questions so far answered. I'll just give you maybe another 30 seconds or so, see if there's any more questions here before we wrap up. While we're doing that, just a quick note, thanks a lot everyone for joining us today for the webinar. Hopefully this was helpful. Hopefully we were able to, I was able to show you some of the ways that we can help solve some of the challenges or problems that you're facing day to day with your current solution and your current role at the school. And my name is Jeff, so if you have any questions, you can reach out to me at any time. We'll follow up with everyone that joined the webinar today just to make sure you got everything that you need and see if we can answer any follow-up questions for you. It looks like there's no other questions that are coming in, so we'll go ahead and wrap it up. Hope you have a good rest of your day, and hope to chat soon. Thanks a lot for your time. Take care.